Hi, I am Hercule Poirot, and welcome to my new mystery case.
London's St. James Square had seen its share of scandals whispered behind satin gloves and club-room doors, but nothing so dramatic as the tableau discovered on the crisp autumn morning of October 3rd. The square, usually a sanctuary for discreet diplomats, retired colonels, and men who liked to think their secrets safe, found itself for once quite incapable of silence. For at the foot of the gleaming marble fountain, known among locals as the Siren of St. James for the stone nymph seated atop its pedestal, lay the lifeless body of Sir Geoffrey Wenscombe. A financier of immaculate reputation, chairman of 3 powerful trusts and owner of property that half of London envied, Sir Geoffrey was also a man who inspired a curiously equal mixture of admiration and dislike. But no one had expected this. A corpse in immaculate evening wear sprawled on the fountain's wet mosaic tiles as the stone siren above him poured water serenely over her urn. And it was not only Sir Geoffrey's death that stirred unease. It was the pose. Sir Geoffrey sat propped unnaturally against the base of the fountain, as though arranged, one arm outstretched toward the water, the other folded neatly across his lap. His eyes were half-lidded, as if in contemplation. A faint smile, or the memory of one, rested on his lips. No sign of violence, no blood, no struggle. A man simply stilled. Constable Hargreaves, first on the scene, had muttered that he had never seen a corpse look so at peace. His sergeant disagreed. There was something too intentional in the arrangement, too deliberate. The small crowd that gathered whispered theories like wind-tossed leaves. "A heart attack," suggested Lady Pembroke haughtily, though even she sounded unconvinced. "Poison," hissed a young footman, his eyes gleaming with a relish unbecoming of his station. "A message," murmured a diplomat's wife. "Oh, can't you see it? Someone staged him, like a painting." The uniformed men did their best to disperse the curious, but the square's residents lingered behind drawn curtains and half-opened shutters, watching, listening, absorbing every detail for the inevitable retellings over tea. By 9:30, Scotland Yard had arrived. Inspector Jarrow, a lean man with a permanently tightened expression, as though the world existed solely to annoy him, knelt by the body, his brow creasing deeper with each passing minute. There was no wallet, no pocket watch, no sign of the signet ring Sir Geoffrey was known never to remove. Robbery, then? Yet the arrangement of the body contradicted such a brutish motive. It was then that the first hint of discord, of theatricality, revealed itself. In the fountain's shallow water basin, directly beneath the stone siren, floated a single white carnation, its petals pristine despite the current that should have carried it away. It seemed placed there, offered almost. Jarrow did not like mysteries, and he liked this one least of all. He straightened abruptly. "This is a killing," he announced to his constables, "and make no mistake, it is a deliberate one." A hush fell over the gathering. "Sir," a constable ventured, "should we call for the—" Inspector Jarrow's grimace deepened. "We'll need more than our own. Fetch a man who likes this sort of puzzle." A brief pause, a reluctant sigh. "Send for Hercule Poirot." The name rolled through the crowd with the inevitable weight of a turning tide. Poirot, the foreigner with the immaculate moustaches and uncanny ability to draw secrets out like silk thread from a tangled tapestry. A man who believed disorder to be the very root of crime, a man who prized the psychology of motive above any material clue. A man who, for reasons entirely his own, seldom refused a challenge worthy of his little grey cells. And somewhere in a modest but elegant flat on Whitehaven Mansions, the great detective was at that moment stirring his morning chocolate, blissfully unaware that a siren, carved in marble and steeped in mystery, was calling to him across the city. The call of the Siren of St. James, and the secrets her waters held, was about to reach him. Hercule Poirot was not a man who welcomed early morning interruptions, least of all on a day he had designated for the tending of his moustaches. Yet when Miss Felicity Grant, his efficient and ever-disciplined secretary, appeared at the doorway of his breakfast-room with an expression suggesting the universe had once again descended into chaos, Poirot set aside his cup with a resigned sigh. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, "Scotland Yard has telephoned. Inspector Jarrow asks for your immediate assistance. There has been a death." "There is always a death," Poirot murmured, folding his napkin with delicate precision. "But does Inspector Jarrow believe it a murder?" Miss Grant hesitated. "I believes it arranged." Poirot's brows rose. "Ah, then it is indeed a puzzle. And Inspector Jarrow is a man who detests puzzles. Very well. Let us see this tragedy which has disturbed the good inspector's digestion." He dressed swiftly, an elegant dove-grey suit, perfectly balanced tie, and the final ceremonial touch, his hat, angled just so. Within minutes, he was in a cab headed to St. James Square, where the morning stillness had long since dissolved into a buzz of speculation. Uniformed officers held back a thinning but persistent crowd. Poirot stepped out, his small figure commanding immediate attention through sheer presence rather than size. Inspector Jarrow approached with his characteristic briskness. "Poirot, thank you for coming. I don't mind telling you this one's peculiar." Poirot gave a little bow. "If it were not peculiar, mon ami, you would not summon Hercule Poirot before he has finished his chocolate. Now show me." They walked to the fountain, the marble siren presiding over the scene with serene indifference. Sir Geoffrey's body remained exactly as found. Jarrow had insisted nothing be disturbed until Poirot had seen it. The detective paused several paces away, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "The pose," Poirot murmured. "Too peaceful, too symmetrical, a murderer with an eye for presentation." "Or someone mocking us," Jarrow muttered. "Robbery too, his ring, wallet, watch, all gone." Poirot's gaze moved to the floating carnation. "And yet the thief takes but also leaves. Interesting, n'est-ce pas? A robber does not leave a flower unless he is a poet, and I do not believe poets often commit murder before breakfast." Jarrow cleared his throat. "Cause of death unknown, no marks. Dr. Kenley is baffled." "Then we must look to the psychology, not the body," Poirot said softly. "Tell me, who was Sir Geoffrey Wenscombe?" "A financier, powerful, connected, and between us, not much liked." Poirot nodded slowly. "A man with enemies, then? But enemies do not often stage their victims in marble fountains. That requires flair." He stepped closer, observing the precise placement of Sir Geoffrey's limbs. With a gloved hand, he examined the lapel of the dead man's coat, then the faint condensation on the marble behind him. A tiny furrow appeared between Poirot's brows. "He was moved," Poirot announced. Jarrow blinked. "Moved? But the tiles are wet. There's no drag mark, no—" No, he was moved only a little, adjusted, like a doll placed just so. The killer wished us to see something, or to believe something." His eyes followed the trickling water. Clear, steady, shimmering in the autumn light. Then, without warning, he looked up sharply. "Inspector, what lies behind this fountain? Is there access?" "A service gate," Jarrow replied reluctantly. "Locked, supposedly?" "Supposedly," Poirot repeated. "We must check it." As Jarrow dispatched a constable, Poirot knelt slowly, methodically, beside the basin. His gaze drifted again to the carnation. He plucked it from the water, studying the petals. "Fresh," he murmured. "Placed not long before the body was discovered. A gesture, perhaps. An offering." Jarrow grimaced. You think there's symbolism involved? With murder, mon ami, there is always symbolism, even when the murderer does not realize it. A moment later, the constable returned. Sir, the service gate. It's unlocked and looks like it's been used recently. Poirot nodded once. So, our killer had an escape route. He brings the body here, or kills the man elsewhere, and arranges his little tableau. And then, when the square is quiet, departs as though he were never here. Why go through the trouble? Jarrow demanded. Why arrange him like a sculpture? Poirot looked again at the siren, the calm stone face tilted eternally toward her cascading water. Because, Inspector, the killer wishes to tell a story. The question is, does he wish to tell the truth, or does he wish to tell a lie? Before Jarrow could respond, a commotion sounded behind them. A tall woman in her late 40s, impeccably dressed and visibly trembling, pushed past the constables. "Let me through!" she cried. "That is my husband!" Lady Helena Wenscombe, society's darling, known for her poise, now shattered. Jarrow attempted to steady her. "My lady, please!" But she was already kneeling beside the body, her gloved hand hovering inches above her husband's cheek, before she recoiled, as though the cold marble itself had burned her. Poirot watched quietly, noting the tremor in her voice, the tightness around her eyes, the way her gaze flicked, not to the carnation, but to the siren looming above. She was afraid, not grief-stricken, afraid. "This is no robbery," she whispered. "This is a message. I told Geoffrey this would happen. I told him." Poirot stepped forward, gentle but firm. "Madame, from whom did you expect this?" She looked at him then, really looked, and in her blue eyes Poirot saw terror wrapped in restraint. "There are things you do not understand, Monsieur Poirot," she said. "Things Geoffrey kept hidden, and now that he is dead, those secrets will not remain buried." Poirot inclined his head. "Then, madame, we shall unbury them together." But Lady Wenscombe shook her head violently. "No, you do not know what you are asking. Whoever did this, they will not stop." Poirot's voice softened. "Madame, I have faced many who believed themselves unstoppable." She stared at him for a long, trembling moment. "Then God help us all." And with that ominous declaration, the first crack in the facade of St. James Square spread, quietly, invisibly, into something far deeper. For Poirot knew now, beyond any doubt, that Sir Geoffrey Wenscombe had lived a life arranged with the same precision as the way he now lay in death. And somewhere, among the privileged residents of this elegant square, someone had decided his ordered life must end. The constables led Lady Wenscombe away to recover her composure, though Poirot suspected her distress was not merely that of bereavement, but of a woman who feared what revelations might now surface. He watched her retreat with measured curiosity, noting the stiffness of her gait, the way she kept her head turned slightly, as if listening for something, or someone, behind her. When she disappeared beyond the small crowd, Poirot returned his gaze to Sir Geoffrey's arranged form. The fountain's gentle trickle seemed louder now, punctuating the silence that had settled over the square. Inspector Jarrow cleared his throat and shifted impatiently, clearly uncomfortable with matters of emotion. "We'll need to speak with her again once she's steady." Poirot nodded. But not before I have spoken with the others who dwell here. A murder such as this does not occur without witnesses, not of the act itself perhaps, but of the tensions that precede it." Jarrow gestured toward a cluster of elegant townhouses facing the fountain. Most of them were home last night, wealthy area, many servants, but no one claims to have seen or heard a thing. "People of refinement," Poirot murmured, "often see more than they admit. and hear more than they understand. As they spoke, a tall, impeccably dressed man stepped forward from the crowd. His features were sharp, his hair perfectly combed, and his expression calculated. "Inspector Jarrow," he said, inclining his head, "I imagine you will wish to speak with me at some point. Charles Ashbury. I live directly opposite the fountain. Terrible business." Poirot appraised him with polite interest. "Monsieur Ashbury, you observed the commotion this morning?" "I awoke to the sound of voices outside," Ashbury replied smoothly. "Unusual at such an hour. I looked from my window and saw this." He indicated the body with a gesture that was neither callous nor sympathetic, merely precise, as though he were accustomed to delivering unpleasant news without embracing it. Poirot found that detail curious. "And last night?" Poirot asked. "Did you observe Sir Geoffrey then?" Ashbury paused. "Not precisely, but I did see him earlier in the evening, leaving in a hurry." He seemed preoccupied. "Alone?" "Yes, quite alone." Poirot filed the information away. A man leaving alone, troubled, only to return later, and meet a staged death in the fountain. Such symmetry rarely occurred by chance. "Merci, monsieur," Poirot said gently. "We shall speak more later." Ashbury inclined his head politely and stepped back, though Poirot noticed he remained close enough to listen. A man accustomed to involvement, perhaps too much so. Another voice called out suddenly, sharp and irritated, "Is this to go on all day? Some of us have responsibilities." A woman in her 30s strode forward, her expression fierce, her auburn hair pinned with military precision. She wore a crisp suit as though prepared for battle. Jarrow sighed. "Miss Brantford," he muttered, "resident of number 4, barrister, difficult." Miss Brantford fixed Poirot with a stern gaze. "If you intend to interview everyone, I would appreciate haste. I have a court appearance, and I cannot be late, because someone has decided to stage a melodrama in our square." Poirot inclined his head calmly. "Mademoiselle, a man is dead. Courtesy compels us to—" "Courtesy," she snapped, "does not resurrect the deceased." Poirot observed her carefully. Her outrage seemed genuine, but it held an undertone he recognized. Fear disguised beneath efficiency. People of intellect often hid their anxieties behind sternness. "Were you acquainted with Sir Geoffrey?" he asked quietly. Her jaw tightened. "Professionally. I advised him on several matters. That is all." "And when did you last see him alive?" "I delivered documents to his home yesterday afternoon. He was unsettled, argumentative, and in one of his irritable moods. But that wasn't unusual." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Unusual or not, mademoiselle, did he mention a concern or a threat?" Her eyes flickered, only for a moment. "If he did, it was not my affair." With that, she turned sharply and retreated, leaving Poirot with the distinct impression that she had told the truth. But not the whole of it. Jarrow exhaled loudly. "You see what I'm dealing with? Half the residents are secretive, the other half insufferable." Poirot smiled faintly. "Secrets, mon ami, are often more revealing than confessions." As they surveyed the square once more, a young man in a worn but tidy coat approached hesitantly. He looked out of place among the refined residents, nervous, earnest, and carrying a leather folio tucked protectively under his arm. "Excuse me," he said, voice shaking. I believe I should speak to someone. My name is Colin Mercer. I'm Sir Geoffrey's assistant." Poirot and Jarrow exchanged a glance before turning their full attention to the newcomer. "Your timing is most fortunate," Poirot said warmly. "What brings you here so early?" Mercer swallowed hard. "Sir Geoffrey asked me yesterday to bring some documents to his house this morning. Urgent ones. I arrived before 8, but the door was locked and no one answered. Then I saw all." This. You were close with your employer? Poirot asked. Mercer hesitated. Close, not exactly. He was demanding, sharp-tempered, brilliant, but not easy. Still, I admired him. He didn't deserve this. Poirot studied the young man's trembling hands. You are afraid, monsieur? Why? Mercer clutched his folio. Because the documents I brought, they may be connected to his death. Jarrow stiffened. What documents? Mercer opened the folio with shaking fingers, revealing several sealed envelopes and a thick ledger bound in dark leather. Sir Geoffrey discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. He said it could ruin someone powerful, and that he needed to act before it was too late. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And he did not tell you what this discovery was. No, only that it was dangerous, and that he feared someone had already found out he knew. Poirot reached out and touched the ledger lightly. Then, Monsieur Mercer, it appears Sir Geoffrey Wenscombe was killed not for who he was, but for what he knew. And as the morning sun rose fully over St. James Square, the marble siren's stone face seemed almost to smile, as though she alone understood the secret now swirling beneath her tranquil waters. Poirot remained perfectly still for a moment after Mercer's trembling confession, as though weighing not just the young man's words, but the manner in which they were spoken. The square, already tense, seemed to tighten further around them. Mercer's eyes darted nervously from the folio to the fountain, as if expecting Sir Geoffrey's arranged corpse to sit up and accuse him. Poirot, noting the young man's agitation, guided him a short distance away from the murmuring crowd. Inspector Jarrow followed, his impatience at odds with Poirot's careful calm. "Begin at the beginning, if you please," Poirot said softly. "What did Sir Geoffrey tell you yesterday?" Mercer swallowed. "He called me into his study just before he left the office. He said he'd uncovered irregularities, financial ones. He didn't give details, but he seemed shaken. I'd never seen him like that." "And he instructed you to bring him these documents this morning," Poirot said. "Yes. He said he needed them urgently, but he didn't want to transport them himself. He thought it safer if I kept them overnight." Poirot's brows lifted. "Safer with you than with him?" "That's what he said. I thought he was overreacting, but now—" Poirot let the silence fill Mercer's trembling uncertainty. "You believe he feared someone might kill him?" Mercer hesitated. I didn't then, but now I don't know what to think." Inspector Jarrow gestured sharply to the folio. "We'll take all of that. It goes straight to the Yard." Mercer clutched it instinctively. "Please, be careful. Sir Geoffrey said the ledger alone contains things that shouldn't—" "Shouldn't what?" Jarrow cut in. Mercer looked down at the folio, his voice barely above a whisper. "Shouldn't exist." Poirot felt a soft stir of interest. "Then it is indeed a most delicate matter. But tell me, monsieur, did Sir Geoffrey name anyone he suspected?" "No, only that someone had been sniffing around his accounts, someone with influence." Poirot inclined his head thoughtfully. "Influence can be a cloak or a dagger. It depends who wears it." Before Mercer could respond, a shout rang out from near the fountain. A constable waved urgently. Poirot and Jarrow hurried back, Mercer trailing behind like a guilty shadow. The constable pointed to the fountain's stone base. "Sir, found this just now, wedged behind the pedestal." He held out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. Jarrow unfolded it and hissed. It was a ring, Sir Geoffrey's signet ring. Poirot leaned in. "Not stolen, then, hidden?" Jarrow looked furious. "Why take it at all, just to leave it here?" Poirot tapped his finger against the air. "Because, mon ami, the killer wishes to mislead. Robbery is an easy explanation, too easy, but the ring left hidden suggests a symbolic act. Mercer paled. Symbolic? Oui, Poirot murmured. A message meant not for us, but for someone else. Jarrow motioned to bag the ring, but Poirot held up a hand. One moment. Note the angle, the placement, the care. Taken to conceal, but not too deeply. This is theatre. Whoever killed Sir Geoffrey is very deliberate. The constable returned to his search, and Poirot took another long, deliberate look at the body. The placement of the hands, the serene expression, the carnation drifting just inches away. A tableau, a performance. Poirot turned sharply. Inspector, who discovered the body? Caretaker, Jarrow said. Lives 2 houses down. Old fellow named Norris. Then we must speak with him. People who walk the square at dawn often see more than they know. As Jarrow summoned an officer to fetch Norris, Poirot glanced at Mercer. The young man looked as though he wished to flee but lacked the courage. Monsieur Mercer, do not wander far. I shall have more questions for you. Mercer nodded weakly. Minutes later, the caretaker, Mr. Norris, was brought forward, a wiry man with silver hair and a gait that hinted at old injuries. He wrung his cap in his hands, eyes darting toward the fountain with unease. I found him just after sunrise, Norris said. Thought he was a drunk at first. Then I saw his face. Poirot asked gently, Did you notice anything unusual before you approached the body? Norris nodded slowly. The square was too quiet. No birds even, and the fountain, well, it sounded different. Like someone had just turned it back on. Poirot straightened. Turned back on? Yes, sir. The water shuts off at night. Saves money. I know the sound it makes when it starts again. It wasn't running when I stepped outside, but by the time I reached the fountain, it was. Poirot's gaze snapped to the mechanism behind the marble pedestal. A timed system, simple but useful. Inspector, the killer may have turned on the fountain to wash something away. A clue, Jarrow muttered. Or to create the illusion of peace, Poirot said quietly. He studied the siren once more, her stone eyes cast downward, as though watching over the scene she'd been made witness to. A symbol, a stage, a message. It was then that Poirot felt the faintest tremor of understanding, not a solution, but the shape of the deception forming in the shadows. Inspector, he said, it is no longer merely a question of who killed Sir Geoffrey. It is a question of why they wished him found in this precise manner. Jarrow frowned. Meaning? Poirot turned slowly, his gaze drifting over the polished windows of the surrounding houses. Meaning the killer is not hiding. He is performing. And somewhere in these houses, someone understands the performance far better than they are willing to say. Poirot remained gazing at the polished windows of St. James Square long after Norris had shuffled away, his cap twisting nervously in his hands. The old caretaker's words lingered. A fountain turned on at dawn, silence deeper than the usual morning hush, a tableau arranged with unsettling care. In Poirot's mind, pieces drifted like fragments of a mosaic, waiting to lock into place. Jarrow, meanwhile, paced in short, frustrated strides. "We'll need to canvass every resident," he muttered. "Somebody must have seen movement during the night." Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Mercer, who hovered anxiously at the fringe of their conversation. "Monsieur," Poirot said gently, "you told us Sir Geoffrey believed someone had discovered his knowledge. Did he indicate how this discovery was made? Was it a leak, perhaps?" Mercer hesitated. "He said something about a pattern, a behavior. He said people reveal themselves when they think no one is watching." Poirot's eyes brightened momentarily. "Ah, a psychological deduction. That, Inspector, is a clue of great value. Jarrow frowned. Because? Because a man who believes he is being observed behaves differently from one who believes himself alone. Sir Geoffrey noticed a change in someone, and in noticing it, he signed his own death warrant. This thought hung in the air like a chill. Mercer swallowed hard. There's more. Last night, before he left, he hinted that he was meeting someone in private, someone who wouldn't want to be seen coming to him. Poirot turned sharply. Did he name this person? No, only that it was someone from the square, someone respectable, someone who pretends otherwise. Jarrow groaned. Half this square pretends otherwise. Poirot ignored the remark. Monsieur Mercer, the documents you brought, did Sir Geoffrey instruct you to read them? Mercer shook his head. He said it was safer if I didn't know details. But he trusted you, Poirot said, else he would not choose you to guard such material. Mercer's voice dropped. I think he regretted involving me. He said if anything happened, I should go to someone outside the normal channels. Poirot lifted an eyebrow. Outside? To whom? He wrote a name on a slip of paper, but it's not in the folio now. I checked. Poirot stiffened. You are certain it was there? Absolutely. I saw him place it inside. Someone must have removed it. Before Jarrow could curse, Poirot raised a hand. We must not leap to conclusions. The missing paper may yet emerge. He stepped closer to the folio and touched the worn leather. May I see the ledger? Mercer offered it with reluctance, as though handing over a living thing. Poirot opened it carefully. The pages were filled with meticulous handwriting, numbers arranged with elegant precision, but several pages toward the end were torn out jaggedly. Jarrow let out a low whistle. Pages ripped out. Someone wanted something gone. Poirot traced the frayed edges. But the tearing is uneven, hasty. He flipped one page, then another. Yet these earlier entries remain. They point clearly toward transactions of questionable nature. Why leave these incriminating records? Jarrow scowled. Because the killer wanted the police to dig in the wrong direction? Poirot smiled faintly. You grow wiser, mon ami. Mercer, pale and restless, interjected. Sir Geoffrey said the person he was meeting would deny everything if questioned openly. He said they were fond of illusion. Poirot's eyes flickered toward the fountain's siren. Illusion, theatre, a staged body, a hidden ring. He murmured almost to himself, this killer is an actor in his soul. Before Jarrow could inquire further, Miss Brantford reappeared at the edge of the square, her expression even sharper than before. Inspector, she snapped, I hope you're making progress, because my chambers are expecting... Her voice cut off abruptly as her gaze fell upon the ledger in Poirot's hands. For a fleeting moment, less than a heartbeat, Poirot saw shock flicker across her composed features. Not mild curiosity, not polite concern, but recognition. It was gone before Jarrow noticed, but Poirot had seen it. He tucked the ledger under his arm with deliberate casualness. Mademoiselle Brantford, he said pleasantly, you have returned. She stiffened. I came to check whether Lady Wenscombe needed anything. I saw her being escorted away earlier. Ah, Poirot murmured. Your concern is admirable. Were you close to Lady Wenscombe? Miss Brantford hesitated. No, merely acquainted. Poirot nodded politely, though he did not believe her. As she turned to leave, Poirot called after her. Tell me, mademoiselle, did Sir Geoffrey consult you recently about any legal irregularities? Her shoulders tensed. I already told you, Monsieur Poirot. He was agitated yesterday, but he didn't confide in me. She departed quickly, too quickly. Mercer watched her go, murmuring, "She came to Geoffrey's office last week. They argued. I heard them through the door." Poirot tilted his head. "Argued? About what?" "I'm not sure, but I heard her say, 'You must destroy it before it destroys you.'" Jarrow swore under his breath. "That's enough to haul her in." "Non," Poirot said firmly. "It is enough to speak with her, but not yet." His gaze drifted once more toward the fountain, the siren's stone face bathed in bright morning light. "There is a rhythm to this crime, Inspector, a choreography. To interrupt it too soon may scatter clues we have not yet seen." Jarrow groaned. "Poirot, this is murder, not opera." "Ah," Poirot said with a small smile, "but sometimes murder is very much opera." Mercer shifted nervously. "Then what should we do now?" Poirot looked at him with a steadiness that eased some of the young man's trembling. "Now, monsieur, we begin to listen, not to what people say, but to what they do not say. Someone here knows precisely why Sir Geoffrey Wenscombe died, and they cannot hide their fear forever." Poirot remained standing near the fountain long after Mercer's anxious whisper faded into the cool morning air. The square seemed to hold its breath, as though aware that the delicate balance of appearances had been disturbed. Inspector Jarrow barked orders to constables, but Poirot heard none of it. His gaze drifted once more to the siren's marble face, serene and cold, her stone fingers forever pouring water that shimmered like spun glass. There was a message here, hidden in ritual and arrangement, and the killer had carved it with deliberate intent. At last, Poirot turned to Jarrow. "Inspector, we must speak with Lady Wenscombe. She holds more within her silence than any ledger contains." Jarrow nodded reluctantly. "She's inside number 7. The doctor's with her." Poirot walked toward the townhouse with Mercer trailing nervously behind him. The young man looked as though he expected the door to burst open with accusation. "Monsieur Poirot," he whispered, Should I stay outside?" Poirot shook his head. "No, you must hear what she says. Sometimes the truth emerges only when the right ears are in the room." Mercer paled further, but followed. The interior of number 7 was a world of quiet wealth, polished mahogany, heavy drapes, and the faint scent of lavender that clung to old regrets. Lady Helena Wenscombe sat upon a chaise near the fireplace, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders though the room was warm, her eyes, red-rimmed but alert, flicked up as Poirot entered. "Madame," Poirot said gently, bowing his head, "may we speak?" She hesitated only a moment. "If it is necessary." Poirot took a seat opposite her, folding his hands neatly. "You said earlier that Geoffrey had secrets that you believed would lead to this." Her breath hitched, and Poirot saw fear cloud her expression. "I did not mean—" she began, but Poirot raised a hand. "You feared something, that much was clear. Will you tell us now what you feared then?" Lady Wenscombe glanced toward the window, where the fountain's silhouette shimmered faintly beyond the glass. "Geoffrey was not the man most people believed. He was brilliant, yes, ambitious, cunning, but he was also reckless. When he thought he had found an opportunity, he took it, regardless of whom it hurt." Mercer shifted uneasily. He wasn't cruel." "No," Lady Wenscombe agreed. "Not cruel, but blind to consequences." She clasped her hands tightly. These past weeks he had become convinced someone intended to ruin him. He wouldn't say who. He dismissed my concerns, brushed away my questions. Poirot leaned forward. "And what concerns did you have, madame?" Her lips parted, trembled, and closed again. When she finally spoke, her voice was cracked and low. "He had enemies, Monsieur Poirot. Enemies he cultivated himself, through arrogance and pride. But there was one person, one above all, who had reason to despise him." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Who?" Lady Wenscombe hesitated. Charles Ashbury. Mercer gasped softly. Mr. Ashbury. Poirot nodded, unsurprised. Tell us why. Lady Wenscombe clasped her shawl tighter. Years ago, Geoffrey and Mr. Ashbury were business partners, or rather, Geoffrey used his connections, his influence. When the venture collapsed, Mr. Ashbury bore the blame, while Geoffrey emerged unscathed. She exhaled shakily. Ashbury lost everything, his reputation, his standing, his fortune. Poirot's gaze flickered. And yet he lives here, in St. James Square. That suggests he has regained much? Oh, he regained it, Lady Wenscombe murmured. Through ruthless effort, but he never forgave Geoffrey. Jarrow crossed his arms. Ashbury saw the body this morning, didn't appear shocked. Because he was expecting something like this, Lady Wenscombe whispered. He told Geoffrey last month that debts have a way of coming due. Poirot tapped a finger on the armrest. A motive, certainly. But a motive alone does not make a killer. What happened between them recently? Lady Wenscombe swallowed. Geoffrey discovered that Ashbury was involved in something illegal, fraud perhaps, that he had built his empire on falsehoods. Geoffrey said he could expose him, and Ashbury said that if Geoffrey dug too deeply he would regret it. Mercer whispered. Sir Geoffrey said someone influential was involved. Jarrow grunted. Ashbury fits that description. Poirot said nothing. A faint suspicion trembled at the edge of his thoughts, not of Ashbury's innocence, but of a deeper complexity. Then Lady Wenscombe lowered her voice. Last night, Geoffrey left the house saying he was meeting someone. He didn't say who, but he was frightened. Truly frightened. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And you did not follow him? I tried, she whispered. I stepped outside minutes after he left, but the square was silent, too silent. I felt as though someone was already watching me. Poirot rose slowly. Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. As they stepped into the hall, Mercer exhaled shakily. Do you think Ashbury? Poirot held up a hand. Thinking is premature. Observation first. They stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The square was quieter now, though constables still moved about. Poirot's gaze drifted across the facades of the elegant houses until it settled on Ashbury's door. Suddenly a sharp cry broke the stillness. A constable came running from the pathway behind the fountain. Inspector, we found something else. Jarrow rushed toward him, Poirot and Mercer close behind. The constable pointed to the narrow garden path. There, half hidden among trimmed hedges, lay a torn scrap of paper. Poirot bent to retrieve it. One edge was ragged, torn from a larger sheet. On it, in hurried handwriting, were 3 words. She knows everything. Poirot felt the faintest chill. It appears, he murmured, that Sir Geoffrey attempted to warn someone before he died. Mercer swallowed. But who is she? Poirot turned the paper over. On the back, faint but unmistakable, was the imprint of a seal he had seen only moments ago. Miss Brantford's chambers. Poirot straightened slowly. Inspector, he said, it seems the opera is entering its next act. Poirot held the torn scrap of paper between 2 careful fingers, as though afraid even the warmth of his touch might disturb its meaning. The faint seal on its reverse caught the morning light, Miss Brantford's chambers unmistakably. Inspector Jarrow leaned in, jaw tightening. So she lied, he muttered. She knew far more than she told us. Poirot did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the path where the scrap had been found, observing the crushed leaves, the bent hedge branches, the faint traces of hurried movement. Mercer hovered behind them, white-faced. Monsieur Poirot, do you think Miss Brantford killed him? Poirot shook his head gently. "Non, monsieur. If she had, she would have ensured such incriminating paper never left her possession. The presence of this note suggests she is not the murderer, but rather someone dangerously entangled." Jarrow grunted. "Either way, she's hiding something. We bring her in now." "No," Poirot said sharply, surprising even Jarrow. "If you confront her too soon, she will retreat behind her barrister's training. She will reveal nothing." Jarrow folded his arms. "What do you suggest?" Poirot's gaze drifted toward Brantford's townhouse. "We observe. We allow her to believe herself still unsuspected, and then we see what she does." Jarrow hated the idea, that much was clear, but Poirot's tone left little room for argument. Poilt lights flickered against the polished windows. Somewhere inside, a curtain shifted. Poirot saw the movement with the corner of his eye and smiled faintly. "She watches," he murmured. "When a person watches, they fear, and when they fear, they act." "Act how?" Mercer whispered. "Often unwisely," Poirot replied. They stepped away from the garden path, allowing the constables to continue their search. Poirot paused once more by the fountain. The siren's expression, carved in permanent serenity, seemed almost mocking now. "Inspector," Poirot said suddenly, "tell me, where is Sir Geoffrey's coat?" Jarrow blinked. "Coat? He isn't wearing one." "Just so," Poirot murmured. "For an October night, that is unusual, n'est-ce pas?" Mercer frowned. "He left the house wearing a coat, I'm certain. A dark overcoat." Poirot nodded. "But it is missing now, perhaps removed, perhaps discarded." Jarrow's eyes widened. "Or perhaps it contained something the killer didn't want found." Poirot allowed himself a small, approving nod. "Exactly." As they pondered this, the front door of Ashbury's townhouse opened. Charles Ashbury stepped out, impeccably dressed, his expression composed yet strained. He walked toward them with an air of forced calm. "Inspector," he said in a smooth voice, "I hear my name being whispered about. Is there something you wish to ask me?" Jarrow stiffened. "We'll speak with you inside." "I prefer to remain outdoors," Ashbury replied coolly. "After this morning's spectacle, I find fresh air necessary." Poirot stepped forward. "Monsieur Ashbury, Lady Wenscombe has informed us of your past business dealings with Sir Geoffrey." Ashbury's jaw tightened, barely a fraction. "Did she? How generous of her." "She said you suffered greatly because of him," Poirot continued, "and that he recently threatened to expose you." Ashbury's expression remained inscrutable. "If Geoffrey wished to expose me, he succeeded brilliantly by dying at my doorstep." Jarrow bristled. "What's your tone, Ashbury?" Ashbury raised a brow. "I am merely stating facts. If you believe I murdered him, Inspector, you are welcome to search my house." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "An unexpected offer." "Because I have nothing to hide," Ashbury snapped, though the tension in his shoulders suggested otherwise. Poirot studied him for a long, silent moment. "Monsieur, where were you last night between 10 and midnight?" "At home," Ashbury replied without hesitation. "Alone?" "Entirely alone." "Convenient," Jarrow muttered. Ashbury ignored him. "Now, unless you have further questions, I would prefer not to stand here as a public spectacle." He turned sharply and strode back to his house. Jarrow exhaled through clenched teeth. "He's lying. You saw how he snapped." "I saw a man accustomed to control," Poirot said quietly, "and one who feels it slipping." Mercer wrung his hands. "Do you think he's the one?" "I think," Poirot murmured, "that guilt and innocence wear similar masks, but the murderer wears his too carefully, too deliberately." Before they could continue, another constable approached. "Inspector," Lady Wenscombe's housekeeper has something to show you." They followed the constable back toward number 7. The housekeeper, Mrs. Dunley, a stout woman with sharp eyes, stood in the doorway, clutching a folded piece of paper. "Begging your pardon, sir," she said, "but I found this in the waste bin of Sir Geoffrey's study. Thought it looked odd enough to keep." Jarrow took the paper and unfolded it. Poirot leaned closer. It was a torn page from a notebook covered with hurried handwriting, a list of numbers, names beside them, dates. But one name caught Poirot's eye instantly. Brantford, Miss Brantford's name, written not once but 3 times and underlined. Mercer inhaled sharply. "Why is her name there?" Poirot did not answer. He examined the page, tracing the final note at the bottom. "If she refuses, the siren sings." Poirot felt a cold shiver of understanding. "Inspector," he said softly, "Sir Geoffrey's death was not merely murder. It was blackmail, performed like art." Jarrow blinked. "Blackmail? But by whom?" Poirot folded the page carefully. "Not by Sir Geoffrey, by someone else. Someone who orchestrated this entire performance." Mercer looked stricken. "Then the killer used Sir Geoffrey as part of the message?" Poirot's voice dropped. "Oui. And now we must discover to whom the message was addressed, and what truth the siren was meant to reveal." Before anyone could speak further, a second constable burst in, breathless. "Inspector, Miss Brantford, she's gone. Her door's open and her things are missing." Jarrow cursed. Poirot closed his eyes for a brief contemplative moment. "The next act," he murmured, "has begun." The news of Miss Brantford's disappearance dropped into the morning air like a stone breaking the surface of a still pond. Poirot did not react with the shock the constable clearly expected. Instead, he regarded the young man with a single, slow blink, as though the world had merely confirmed a suspicion he already held. Inspector Jarrow, on the other hand, erupted. "Gone? What do you mean gone? She was here not 20 minutes ago." The constable grimaced. "Her townhouse door was open, drawers pulled, clothes missing. It looks like she packed in a hurry." Jarrow swore loudly. "Running makes her look guilty." Poirot raised a hand. "Non, mon ami, running makes her look frightened." Mercer hovered to the side, wringing his hands. "Should we go after her?" "Naturally," Jarrow barked. "I'll have men searching every street within a mile." "Inspector." Poirot's voice cut cleanly through the rising tension. "You will accomplish nothing by chasing her blindly. A person in fear does not run without purpose. She has somewhere particular to go." Jarrow turned, exasperated. "Where then?" Poirot gestured toward the fountain. "The answer lies not in where she fled, but in why. Miss Brantford is a barrister, precise, calculated, never impulsive. To vanish so abruptly suggests she received something, a warning, or perhaps a threat." Mercer swallowed. "Do you think the killer contacted her?" Poirot nodded slowly. "That is my belief. The torn note said she knows everything. But what if the message was not left by Sir Geoffrey? What if it was left by the killer, meant to unsettle her?" Jarrow frowned. "But why leave it where we would find it?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Because, Inspector, the killer plays a double game. Each clue is placed to drive us in one direction while concealing another route entirely." Mercer looked increasingly overwhelmed. "So, what do we do?" "We must learn what Miss Brantford knows," Poirot said softly. "And we must begin," he added, "in her chambers." They crossed the square, quickly, constables falling into step. Miss Brantford's townhouse loomed tall and elegant, its door still ajar, as though it had exhaled its last occupant forcibly into the world. Poirot entered first. The interior, once immaculate, was now filled with the hurried disarray of flight. half-open drawers, papers scattered, the faint smell of perfume lingering in the air. Jarrow muttered an oath. "She tore this place apart." "Non," Poirot corrected, bending to examine the floor. "Notice the pattern. She packed only essentials. Clothing. A small valise is missing, but the rest, this disorder, was created before she left." Mercer blinked. "By whom?" "By the killer," Poirot murmured. "Or someone searching for something Geoffrey entrusted to her?" Jarrow stared at him. "You mean Geoffrey gave her something, but she denied knowing anything about his secrets?" Poirot turned a page lying on the carpet. A legal memorandum. A name circled sharply. Wenscombe Trust, irregular transfers. "Ah," he murmured. "Miss Brantford was digging into Geoffrey's affairs herself." He rose slowly. "She was not his accomplice. She was his conscience." Jarrow snorted. "Doesn't make her innocent." "Non," Poirot agreed, "but it may make her a target." From the back room, a constable called out, "Inspector, something here." They hurried down the corridor to Miss Brantford's study. On her desk lay an envelope, torn open. Poirot reached for it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with neatly typed words. "Do not speak to anyone. Meet me at dusk. The Siren keeps its promises." Poirot read it twice, his expression unreadable. "No signature," Jarrow muttered. "No location." "But message enough," Poirot said quietly. "This was left for Miss Brantford, and she obeyed it." Mercer's voice trembled. "But why would she trust such a note?" Poirot glanced at him. "Fear compels obedience more swiftly than trust." Jarrow scratched his head. "What does it mean? The Siren keeps its promises?" Poirot's gaze drifted toward the window overlooking the fountain. "The killer's symbol, Inspector, and perhaps their meeting place." Mercer inhaled sharply. "But dusk is hours away." "Just so," Poirot said, "which gives us time." "And time, monsieur, is an ally the killer believes we do not have." Poirot moved back into the hallway, scanning every detail with meticulous care. The faint scuff marks near the threshold, the absence of dust on the coat hooks, the open safe in the study whose contents had been emptied but not damaged. Jarrow joined him. "Whoever broke into the safe didn't need to force it." "Because Miss Brantford opened it," Poirot corrected. "Under duress?" Mercer whispered. Poirot nodded. "Or under warning?" He tapped the safe's interior gently. "It once held something small. Very small. A document? Perhaps." Poirot's face darkened. Or perhaps the missing slip of paper with the name Sir Geoffrey wanted Mercer to contact. Jarrow cursed. "So now the killer has it." "Oui, but he believes we do not suspect it exists." Poirot turned toward the door. "We must not disappoint him too soon." As they stepped back into the square, the clouds above thickened, dimming the sunlight. Poirot paused beside the fountain once more, watching the water run over the marble siren's hands. "Inspector," he said suddenly, "we must return to Lady Wenscombe. There is something she did not tell us." Jarrow frowned. "You think she's hiding something?" "She is a wife," Poirot replied softly. "Wives hide what husbands fear." Mercer looked bewildered. But what could she still be hiding? Poirot gave him a long, measuring look. The identity of the one person Geoffrey trusted, the one person he believed could protect the truth. Jarrow started to protest, but Poirot raised a single finger. "And she fears telling us not because she doubts us, but because she knows the killer fears that person most of all." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. Poirot turned toward number 7, his step deliberate, his gaze sharp. "Come, Inspector," he murmured. "Lady Wenscombe has held her silence long enough." Lady Wenscombe answered the door herself this time. She stood in the dim foyer without shawl or pretence, her posture straighter than before, as though she had been bracing for their return. Poirot entered without a word. The house felt different now, no longer a chamber of mourning, but a place holding its breath. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "there is more you wish to tell us, and more you fear to say." Her eyes fluttered, widening at his accuracy. She shut the door softly, as if afraid someone outside might hear. "I knew you would come back," she whispered. "I told myself I would not speak further, but—" Her voice faltered. "But everything is unravelling, isn't it?" Jarrow stepped forward. "Miss Brantford has vanished. Someone rifled through her home, and we found a note, one addressed to her, left by someone who expects obedience at dusk." Lady Wenscombe flinched. Poirot observed the involuntary motion, storing it away. He approached her with deliberate softness. "Madame, you told us Geoffrey feared someone. You told us he had enemies. But what you did not tell us was the most important detail, whom he trusted." She pressed a trembling hand to her lips. "I did not think it mattered." "It matters now," Poirot said, "because Miss Brantford was not the only one hiding something." Lady Wenscombe's gaze drifted to the staircase, as if expecting someone to appear. When no one did, she gathered herself. "There is someone Geoffrey confided in, someone he believed could help him." Quietly, Mercer stepped closer. "Who?" Lady Wenscombe hesitated only a breath before answering. "Dr. Lionel Kenley." Inspector Jarrow blinked. "The physician who examined the body?" "Yes, he and Geoffrey knew each other from university. Dr. Kenley has always been discreet, too discreet sometimes." She swallowed. "Geoffrey would speak to him when he feared he was being watched." Poirot's brow furrowed. "But why would a financier trust a doctor with matters of fraud, blackmail and danger?" "Because," Lady Wenscombe whispered, "Dr. Kenley knows everything about everyone here. People confide in a doctor what they dare tell no one else." Her voice trembled. "Including me." Jarrow scratched his chin. "But if Geoffrey trusted him, why didn't Kenley mention it?" Poirot answered calmly. "Because trust is not always mutual, Inspector, and discretion is not always innocent." Before Jarrow could respond, Lady Wenscombe continued. "Last night, Geoffrey left this house just after 10, but he did not go to meet Ashbury. He did not go to meet Miss Brantford. He went to meet Dr. Kenley." Poirot stilled. "And you know this how?" "Because I followed him part way," she confessed. "Not out of suspicion, out of fear, but he walked to Kenley's door and knocked. I saw Dr. Kenley open it. They spoke in low tones, and then Geoffrey went inside." Jarrow frowned. "But Kenley claimed he had not seen Geoffrey since the week before." Lady Wenscombe nodded miserably. "Which means he lied." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, at last the mask cracks." Mercer paced anxiously. "Do you think Dr. Kenley killed Sir Geoffrey?" Poirot shook his head. "I think only that he knows far more than he allows, and he hides it behind the facade of a physician's calm." Jarrow slammed a fist into his palm. "Then let's drag him in." "No," Poirot said sharply. "We must approach him with care. He is clever, perhaps clever enough to anticipate our arrival, and a cornered man does foolish things." Lady Wenscombe's voice broke through their thoughts. "There is more." She crossed the room to a lacquered cabinet and withdrew a narrow envelope, sealed but unaddressed. "Geoffrey left this here 2 nights ago. He told me I must not open it unless he failed to return from his final meeting. I thought it was paranoia. Now—" Poirot accepted the envelope delicately. "May we?" Lady Wenscombe nodded. He broke the seal with a fingernail and unfolded the single sheet inside. 3 lines, hastily written. "If something happens to me, the truth lies not in the accounts, but in the appointments. Kenley knows why the siren matters. Do not trust anyone until you understand the pattern." Mercer inhaled sharply. "Appointments? Does he mean the ledger?" Poirot shook his head. "No, Sir Geoffrey kept another book, a private one, a schedule, a record of who met him, when, and for what purpose. Many men keep such things separate from business ledgers." Jarrow frowned. "But we didn't find anything like that in his study." "And yet," Poirot murmured, "it existed." Lady Wenscombe stepped backward, her hands trembling. "If Kenley knows why the siren matters, what is the siren? Why the fountain?" Poirot turned toward the window, staring at the marble statue. "A siren calls, a siren lures, a siren promises truth at a cost." His gaze sharpened. "The fountain commemorates an older scandal, one nearly buried. A woman drowned there 50 years ago. Her death was ruled accidental, but whispers remained." Jarrow's eyes widened. "You think this case is connected to that?" "I think," Poirot said, "that the killer wishes us to believe so, but misdirection is his art." Before they could delve deeper, a sudden pounding sounded at the door. A constable stood outside, breathless. "Inspector, Dr. Kenley, he's disappeared. His surgery is locked, curtains drawn. His assistant says he left before dawn with a medical bag." Jarrow cursed violently. Mercer went pale. Lady Wenscombe sank into a chair. Poirot remained perfectly still. "At last," he said softly. "The performance nears its crescendo." He turned to Jarrow. "Inspector, we must speak with Dr. Kenley's assistant at once, and then we must search Kenley's surgery, quietly, thoroughly." "And Miss Brantford?" Jarrow asked. Poirot's voice grew grave. "If she is to meet the killer at dusk, we must find her before she keeps that appointment." He stepped into the square, the wind shifting cold around him, the fountain's soft murmur echoing like a whisper from the past. "The siren sings, Inspector," Poirot murmured. "And tonight, someone intends to answer." Dr. Kenley's disappearance forced Poirot and Inspector Jarrow into motion with a new urgency, for the pattern of flight had repeated itself with unnerving precision. Miss Brantford had vanished under pressure, and now the physician had slipped away before dawn, leaving behind a surgery as silent as a sealed tomb. Poirot noted the symmetry with a tightening of his features. The killer was orchestrating each step with theatrical finesse. Mercer followed close beside them, pale but determined, clutching his folio like a lifeline. The wind had grown sharper, carrying a faint metallic scent that lingered uneasily in the square. Kenley's assistant, a timid young man named Alfred Price, trembled as he let them into the surgery. The air smelled of antiseptic and something older, something brittle, as though secrets had been stored too long behind its walls. Price insisted he knew nothing of the doctor's departure, only that Kenley had seemed agitated for days. Poirot studied the assistant's nervous hands and found no deceit, only fear. They moved through the dim rooms, searching meticulously until Poirot halted beside a locked cabinet. With Price's reluctant permission, Jarrow forced it open, revealing appointment books stacked with unsettling order and care. Poirot lifted the top book, its leather cover worn smooth from years of discreet handling. Inside, the names of residents from St. James Square appeared in tidy columns, each paired with dates and cryptic notations. A pattern formed as Poirot turned the pages. Frequent late-night visits, sudden cancellations, and hurried summons marked with an asterisk. Sir Geoffrey's name appeared repeatedly, the final entry circled violently in red. Mercer peered over Poirot's shoulder, horrified. Jarrow muttered that it looked like evidence of blackmail, but Poirot shook his head. Something more intricate lay beneath these scheduled shadows, something calculated and cold. "He used these appointments," Poirot murmured. "Not to blackmail, but to observe behaviour. Sir Geoffrey studied human nature as others study sums." Price's voice trembled as he revealed that Kenley guarded these books fiercely, never allowing anyone to touch them. Poirot flipped to the back, finding a loose sheet tucked between pages. On it was a hand-drawn sketch of the Siren fountain, surrounded by initials. Jarrow frowned, recognizing two of them as residents they had spoken with. Mercer pointed to another. "Miss Brantford." "Why is she here?" he whispered. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Because she knew the story hidden beneath the water's surface." Before Jarrow could question this further, Price startled them by revealing another detail. Sir Geoffrey had met Dr. Kenley at the fountain 2 nights before the murder. Not inside the surgery, not in secret halls, at the Siren itself. Poirot's pulse quickened. The killer had not chosen the fountain arbitrarily. It had already been the stage of clandestine meetings. Perhaps the final appointment had gone terribly wrong. Jarrow demanded Price tell everything, but the assistant insisted he knew nothing else. Poirot believed him. Fear like Price's could not be feigned. The doctor, however, had played a different game entirely. Outside, the clouds thickened, muting the square's colours into sombre shades. Poirot led them back toward the fountain, the sketch still in hand. He stopped before the Siren, tracing the initials on the page to the stone contours of the statue. Something was etched faintly at its base, worn by water, almost invisible. Mercer knelt to examine it. "Letters," he murmured. "Or symbols." Poirot crouched beside him. The carving resembled a date, half erased, 1874. Jarrow frowned. "The year of the drowning you mentioned?" Poirot nodded. "Oui? And the year the truth began to sink beneath these waters." A constable hurried toward them, breath misting. "Inspector, report from the station. Kenley's carriage was seen heading toward the river, near the old warehouses." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "The river? Always the river. A fitting place for a siren's call." Jarrow snapped orders, sending men ahead, but Poirot stopped him. "Inspector, if we rush blindly, we risk losing both. Kenley and Miss Brantford. They will be drawn to the same place." Mercer shuddered. "Do you think she's already there?" Poirot tucked the sketch into his coat. "If she follows the killer's instructions, she will arrive at dusk, and the killer will not wait alone." They moved swiftly toward the station road, constables scattering in widening circles. Poirot walked with deliberate calm, his mind assembling connections like threads drawn taut across a loom. The initials on the sketch, the appointments, the secret meetings at the fountain, all pointed toward a conspiracy born long before Sir Geoffrey's death. Mercer hurried beside him, desperate for reassurance. "Monsieur Poirot, will we find her in time?" Poirot offered only a slight nod. "We will find the truth, monsieur, and with the truth perhaps those endangered by it." But inwardly he feared the killer was already several steps ahead. At the river's edge the air grew colder, carrying the damp heaviness of water lapping against stone. The warehouses loomed like silent sentinels, their broken windows glinting faintly. Poirot paused, surveying the landscape with measured precision. A small rowboat was tied loosely to a post, swaying with the current. Fresh footprints marked the mud. Jarrow knelt to inspect them, but Poirot's gaze had already fixed on a distant shadow moving between 2 warehouses. A figure, swift, purposeful, almost certainly aware of pursuit. "Inspector," Poirot murmured, "our quarry is close." Mercer gasped. "Is it Kenley?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps, or perhaps the hunter himself, at last revealed now fully." The shadow at the river's edge slipped between the warehouses with the swift, nervous urgency of a cornered animal. Poirot moved quickly, not with the speed of youth, but with the certainty of a man who knew exactly where the path was leading. Inspector Jarrow and 2 constables followed, with Mercer close behind, trembling but determined. In the lee of the largest warehouse, half obscured by the gloom, stood Miss Brantford. Her coat whipped in the wind, her suitcase dropped at her feet. Her eyes widened at the sight of Poirot, fear warring with relief. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "you should not be here." "And yet, mademoiselle," Poirot replied softly, "here I am. As are you." Before she could answer, another figure stepped out from the shadows, Dr. Kenley. But the moment he appeared, Poirot knew. This man was not the architect of murder. His fear was too raw, too unmasked. "Brantford, listen to me," Kenley pleaded. "We cannot give in. Whoever sent that message—" "Oh, but you already have," came a cool voice behind them. Charles Ashbury stepped into the dim light, calm, elegant, and utterly composed. A revolver hung loosely in his hand, as though it belonged naturally there. The river wind tugged at his immaculate coat, but he remained still, almost statuesque. Jarrow drew his weapon instantly. "Ashbury, drop it!" Ashbury did not move. "Inspector, please, guns are so crude. I assure you it is not you who interest me." Poirot stepped forward. "Monsieur Ashbury, the performance is over." But Ashbury's smile only sharpened. "No, Monsieur Poirot, the performance ends when I decide." Miss Brantford recoiled. Why are you doing this? Geoffrey wronged you years ago, yes, but murder?" Ashbury's eyes darkened. "Geoffrey Wenscombe destroyed my name, my family, my future. While he rebuilt his empire, I rebuilt something else, a method, a way to use him and then make him fall exactly as he made me fall." Poirot studied him with quiet intensity. "You staged his death with such care, the pose, the flower, the siren, all a symbol, but not of vengeance alone." Ashbury's laugh was soft, brittle. "You understand me too well, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot nodded slowly. "It was not enough for Geoffrey to die. You wanted him displayed. You wanted to accuse someone else." Mercer gasped. "Miss Brantford, the notes. You wanted everyone to blame her." Ashbury turned to the trembling young man. "And it was working too, a barrister with access to Geoffrey's secrets, a sudden disappearance. How tidy the ending might have been." Poirot raised a hand. "But you made one mistake, monsieur. Sir Geoffrey left clues, not in ledgers, but in what he feared. In his appointments, in the pattern of behaviour he studied." Ashbury's smile faltered. Poirot continued, voice steady. "You met Geoffrey at the fountain 2 nights ago. He confronted you with proof of your new fraud. You struck him then, not with violence, but with a proposition. You convinced him to meet you again, alone. He believed he could negotiate, but you—" Poirot gestured toward the Siren fountain. "You completed a story that began 50 years ago. A woman drowned there, whose death your family profited from in silence. You chose the siren because you wanted Geoffrey to be your second symbol, a warning to all who wronged you." Miss Brantford's voice trembled. "And the doctor?" "He was a convenience," Poirot said. "Geoffrey met him the night he died, yes, but Kenley left before the crime. Ashbury went to the fountain alone, moved Geoffrey into that pose, took his ring to stage a robbery, and turned on the water to wash away the traces." Inspector Jarrow stepped forward. "Drop the gun, Ashbury." But Ashbury's grip tightened. Poirot's tone softened. "Monsieur Ashbury, you have been wronged in the past, but in seeking justice you became the very thing you despised, a destroyer of lives." Ashbury's expression flickered. pain, pride, and bitter resignation mingled in a single trembling moment. Then he sighed. "So be it." He tossed the revolver into the river. Constables surged forward, seizing him as he raised his hands. Ashbury did not resist. Miss Brantford slumped against the warehouse wall, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Mercer exhaled shakily, shoulders collapsing in relief. Dr. Kenley closed his eyes as though waking from a nightmare long in the making. Poirot watched Ashbury taken away, the man walking with the tranquil gait of someone whose story had finally reached its end. Jarrow turned to Poirot. "You solved it, then? The entire thing?" Poirot shook his head gently. "No, Inspector, it solved itself. I merely listened to what was not said, to the fear, the silence, the contradictions. Human nature is the truest clue." As they walked back towards St. James Square, Miss Brantford murmured, "Monsieur Poirot, would Geoffrey have survived if he had spoken sooner?" Poirot paused, looking toward the river's dark sweep. "Perhaps," he said softly. "But it is the tragedy of many men that they speak only when they believe time remains." The marble siren greeted them as they returned, silent, serene, watching the world with carved indifference. Poirot studied her one last time, then tipped his hat. "The siren has sung her final song," he murmured, "and the truth, at last, has answered." With that, Hercule Poirot turned away, his little grey cells at peace, and walked into the fading light as the square slowly, quietly reclaimed its order.